Hey YouTube, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. Today we're going to be talking about money. Dedicated 2 decades of my life to the subject. I think it's over 2 decades now. And I was thinking while I was on the treadmill this morning of a few metaphors that might add some value to those. And the following is I came up with 3 conclusions: that money is a knife, is a drug, and is a lethal injection. So we're going to be discussing that today, a little bit more philosophical than the normal topic, but here's what I know for a fact. Having been completely broke, over £100,000, $150,000 in debt, and having absolutely nothing, and being more financially free than I could ever imagine possible, having been on both sides of the equation, I've seen that money can be a knife, a drug, and a lethal injection. And it doesn't actually change too much, but it changes a bit of the psyche. So let's investigate now. What do I mean by a knife? So if anything we are experiencing right now is that money can be used to either cut or kill. And we are experiencing that right now. Now, who you hand a knife to determines whether that knife will be used to kill and complete destruction, or whether it will be used to be cut and a very useful tool that improves the quality of your life, your family's life, and maybe the people around you as well through cause and effect. And so here's what I want to distinguish as well. The title is slightly misleading. And as a monetary geek, some people will understand the nuances in this. There is a difference between money and currency, and it's worth drawing out some lessons here. While we do the psychology, I'll mix in a bit of strategy on money as well. So currency is what is mainly created. So you hear about the word digital currency, right? That is what most the euro, the dollar, the pound, the yuan is. It is a digital entry that exists on a computer. It was created by a bank, and it only gets its power from legal tender because it is a digital representation of the money that the currency, got to get my word right, even I do some Freudian slips here, the currency that the government decided was the legal tender of that country. And the difference between currency and money is that currency's supply can be changed, and therefore it is not a good store of value. A store of value means that it maintains its value over time, or it increases its value when you hold it over time. Or it preserves your wealth at the very least by definition. So what most people consider money, i.e. notes and coins and digital entries when they log into their online banking, or their credit card statement, or their mortgage statement, or their student loan, what most people consider money is in fact currency. And money, there's only a couple of forms of money. There's one form of money, which is money that grows out of the ground, which is gold. The challenge with gold is that the supply can be increased. As the price go up, it rewards the production and mining of more gold, but it still has somewhat of a fixed supply that increases as the pricing goes up. And Bitcoin is another form because it is backed up by proof of work. The miners therefore make it impossible for the supply to change, and the supply of it is enforced by maths and code, and therefore long term you can't change its supply, and therefore it can perform the functions of money as a store of value. With Bitcoin, it's more of a speculative store of value because historically it has increased people's wealth. With gold, it's more of a store of value because over 5,000 years it has preserved people's wealth. Fiat is not a store of value, therefore it's a currency because it's designed to go down in value and make you more poor over time if you save in that currency. So anyway, what does it mean by a knife? So what we have seen is that whether you accumulate currency or money, if you put it in the wrong person's hand, then currency and money can both be used to kill, or it can be used to be a very useful tool and mechanism for good. So my hope in this YouTube channel is by sharing with you some of the tools and the distinctions from obsessing over the subject of currency and money for over 2 decades, is that I am handing you a knife that you will use as a nice tool to be a good force for good in the world. My delusion in doing this is that. But at times, can't we all be destructive? Can't we all use it to kill, and other times use it to cut as a useful tool? Depends upon our state and the environment in which we surround ourselves in determining whether those types of actions happen. So my message to everybody is that though many people think, and I want to empathize with those that are in a financial environment right now where poverty is incredibly destructive in terms of their possibilities, options, and freedoms, but at the same time, I have been just as destructive or just as a force for good when I had absolutely no money as when I am fully financially free. So just want to know that not necessarily accumulating more money changes the character of what you do with that money, but I also recognize and appreciate that that's coming from a white British privileged person that although has been in debt poverty, at least I was given the opportunity to have access to financial services and be in debt because I lived and was lucky enough to be born in a country where such opportunities existed, and therefore I was born with such privilege. And I appreciate that I was not given the same deck of cards that you were. But I want you to know that the rules are the same for everybody. Once you get above that baseline, money can be used as both a force for destruction and a force for good. What determines that, what shapes that, is your character and what you decide to do with that money. So one thing I can tell you is that if you give people the ability to own their own money, then it gives people the ability to hold their knife and they can use it as they choose. And whether they use it for good or bad is where it's interesting with Bitcoin, because it creates an immutable record of that. And while your identity is anonymous, if you use it to do illegal things and commit crime, then there is a record of those transactions. They can't tie it to you without the law enforcement. But it takes out that middle person so you can get way more targeted in law enforcement. The second one, it is a drug. The reason that I know that is because we often give ourselves the delusion that simply accumulating some more money short term will solve all of our problems, and we never really focus on the long term. And to me, that is the definition of a drug. A drug is an addiction, an addictive behavior on something that gives you a short-term result, but is not necessarily productive for you in the long term. Now, sometimes we need that short-term stimulus just to get over a certain thing, but inevitably it has long-term consequences. And so what most people do is they treat money as a drug. This is what drives people into trading, into gambling, into opportunity seeking, into looking for that quick fix, into finding that get-rich-quick scheme, into trying to go for that scam because it promised huge returns even though you knew there was nothing sustainable in it. Or the focusing rather on the drug, a drug that can actually enhance your long-term rather than just working on symptoms. And obviously there are drugs out there that can be used in order to enhance your long-term sustainable performance. And there are drugs out there that are completely destructive, give you a short-term fix, but leave you with all the pain and suffering of the long term because you were focused too much on the short term. So the lesson here is to increase your time preference. And time preference is a concept of foregoing the short term for the long term. It's why people find it so hard to save. It's why people do that and it's why people end up on the wrong side of wealth inequality, because they use the products and debt in order to accumulate more consumable goods that make them feel good so they can take the Instagram photo, and then they end up long-term in a financial debt trap. Rather than using these tools as leverage, or not even using those tools at all in order to invest in assets that get you on the right side and I'm not saying you should put all your money into investing. What the hell is life for if you don't have a plan for living it great? And one of the things that I always try to encourage people to do is to separate their spending money from their investing money, so that you don't feel the short-term drugs and emotions when your living expenses are being sacrificed as a result of your investments not performing, decreasing your time preference, where you have to sell your assets or sell your Bitcoin in order to meet your expenses because you didn't manage that money well. So money, currency, can also be a drug. It can give you addictive, it can make people addicted to short-term gains, and it costs you long-term because you didn't have the time preference to do the sustainable things of a long-term investor that actually have a lasting impact. And rather than drive you in and up like a drug where you're at maximum peak high and then you go down to maximum peak low where you have all the money and no money, rather than actually putting together a sustainable plan for financial freedom, so that no matter what happens in the economy, inflation, deflation, economic growth, economic decline, your business failure, your bank seizure, sanctions, war, whatever it may be, you bank bail-in, bank bailout, inflation, all those types of things, you have figured out a long-term plan, not a short-term drug, a long-term sustainable plan for your financial affairs. And the final thing is that it can be a lethal injection. By lethal injection, I mean that if you inject a ginormous sum of money into the economy like the leaders have in their countries, then it has a destructive effect on people's savings as it gets inflated away, where people are essentially lending money to the government at 2%, when inflation is at 7.9%, so they're losing approximately 6% in order to take their money out of a bank so that they don't have the credit risk of a bank and lend it to the government through treasuries and bond markets and various other things. People are willing to go into financial suicide in order to try and preserve some of that wealth by lending it to governments and taking away some of the bank risk and moving it over to the credit risk of that government. So if you are saving in currency rather than money, then you have to work harder and harder and harder in order to try and preserve that currency. The key is taking that currency that you earn, spending less than you earn, and investing the difference in a sustainable way that prepares you for all outcomes, and not as a short-term get-rich-quick scheme drug, but as a long-term mechanism for building financial muscles. It's why I've been here at the gym, making sure that I've got the health and wellness to ensure that I can deliver to you a message that supports more people in these troubling financial times that some people find themselves in, and build tools supporting the Bitcoin community and countries and companies and individuals in giving them more tools to get on the right side of financial change. So in summary, money versus currency. Currency is what you tend to earn unless you work for a company that pays you in Bitcoin or gold. Then your gold is a wealth preserver. Your Bitcoin historically has been a wealth creator, because the demand for money, you can own money, you can spend the money that has a fixed supply, has historically gone up over time despite all the short-term fluctuations and volatility. If you were trading Bitcoin as a drug, and therefore you were looking at it as a mechanism for earning more fiat, so you were seeing the price of Bitcoin and measuring your wealth in fiat currency, then you have given yourself a lethal injection, which is that you are valuing your wealth in fiat currency, you are thinking in fiat currency, and if you are saving in fiat currency, then your long-term wealth means that you are inevitably, predictably, and guaranteed going to have many of the monetary problems that most people in the world are experiencing right now. I also want to let you know that having been on both sides of the financial ladder, having been in dire debt where I have no idea where the money to pay the next bill comes from, and having been in a position of financial freedom where I feel well protected for any outcome, I can tell you that money does not mean your problems go away. I understand that getting above a certain baseline of poverty and survival makes a huge difference in the human psyche and the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But once you get past a certain point, whether you use it as a force for good or a force for destruction is what you do with that knife. Whether you use it to make you more happy or more depressed is based upon how you use that drug of that. And I know people that have more money in the world and their problems just get bigger and bigger and bigger because they haven't learned how to use this mechanism behind that. So while accumulating money is a force for good, it can be a force for good. It can also allow you to experience more depression, more problems. And it's why we see some of the wealthiest people in the world, in Hollywood or wherever it may be, committing suicide because they haven't actually, the money doesn't give them the happiness. It allowed them to turn up to depression in a Ferrari. And money does allow you, it gives you more freedoms, it gives you more options, it gives you more possibilities. And my hope is, and my delusion is, that you use the tools that I share about on YouTube. If you like this, then hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all, and hit the bell symbol, hit all, and then YouTube will notify you, and I'll give you the more practical strategies as the financial system unfolds. But today is all about the psychology. So money and currency can be used as both a force for good or force for evil, depending on how you decide to use that tool. It can also allow you to be completely depressed with no money or completely happy with no money. And it can also allow you to be completely depressed and arrive in a Ferrari if you have that money, giving you more options, but it still doesn't deal with the underlying of what may be causing you so much anxiety, stress, or whatever it may be. And remember, your problems still can increase. It goes from problems of not having enough money to having too much money. Where do I put my money? How do I stop it being inflated away? How do I save it? How do I invest it? It takes you to problems of, is this person only loving me because of my money? And therefore you get people that might want to marry you or whatever with bad intent. I was fortunate enough to meet my wife when I had absolutely nothing, and we built everything together. But when you meet people with money, it also has those problems. So then you think about protections. It also gives you the problem of not knowing whether you can find the best advisors. It gives you the problems of protection. It gives you the problems of making sure that you're not on the wrong side of financial history, that leads you to being sanctioned or discriminated against because you were born in the wrong country, and the actions of your leaders affects the actions of you as an individual, as we're experiencing all around the world right now. And you know, it then talks about legacy issues, inheritance problems, all that stuff. People always wanting to extract money out of you, people wanting to pitch you business plans, never being a part of who you are, always trying to get something out of you, or it can just be an absolute force for good, where you take your money, you protect yourself, you build and protect it, and you also decide to pick up the knife and use it as a force for good rather than a force for evil. And you work on your psyche, understand the rules that govern money. I'm going to be writing a new book, by the way, on money. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments on what you would like covered in that book. But I'm putting together all the tools, understand the past, present, and future, and everything that an individual, a company, and a country would need to do to master the game from the experience of someone that's been broke, and has achieved the financial freedom for both my company, supporting countries, and on the individual level. So let me know in the comment section what you would like to see. What's your biggest question about money? Do you completely disagree or agree with some of the things? Let's see and hear your comments. In summary, money and currency can be a knife, it can be a drug, and it can be a lethal injection. So always remember, you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Some are going to get hurt, others are going to do really well. Subscribe to this channel, hit the like, hit the share, hit the bell symbol, hit all, and I will make sure that you have the tools to try and stay on the right side of financial history with peace, love, and unity. Peace.